Good morning, prayer partners. I just want to just introduce my guest that I have on here with me today. His name is Dante Carter, and just a really amazing man. I want to let you tell more about yourself, Dante, who you are, what you do, and what you're about.
Well, thank you so much, and I appreciate you having me on today. Man, I think I'm honestly in this nutshell just a man just trying to try my best to replicate everything that Yahusha, Jesus Christ, stood for. I think that's the biggest thing that for me that I'm trying to replicate. In my professional life, I'm a communication strategist. I run my own firm, Carter Media Group. Um, we've been able to be a voice in this social justice space of really crafting a narrative that provides context to a lot of the real issues that we deal with, everything from the Surviving R. Kelly case to the Ahmaud Arbery case to voting rights issues in Georgia. I just think it's important to make sure that we're having these conversations in context. And so I spent a lot of time doing that and really just growing in my faith. Have had a great opportunity to visit one of the oldest Black churches in America that's out in Savannah, and really just getting a better idea of kind of who our ancestors and who the enslaved folks that came off those ships say that we were, and really going out and visiting Portugal, where I know a lot of my ancestors were, and just being able to get just a more contextualized understanding of God and how that influence has been there within our ancestry prior to the creation of Western theology. And so I think that's been extremely powerful for me.
Wow, 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 wow. Okay, and you were very involved in all those cases you just listed, right?
Yeah.
The Ahmaud Arbery case and the Surviving R. Kelly case, and all that. Can you tell me a little bit more about like what your involvement was, or what was your?
Yeah. I mean, I was one of the firms, well, with the Surviving R. Kelly case, I was the firm that came up with the PR push, compiling that whole strategy with the Ahmad case. I was one of the firms. They had a few of us that came in and really helped to push. And I think we're at a place where people understand that there's a lot that's missing in terms of telling these stories. And so we're getting people within our community who are stepping up and saying, we want to broaden this conversation. We're not just going to allow certain individuals to have a very one-sided conversation. No, we're going to have this conversation in its full context. We're going to talk about why what happened was wrong and what actually happened. I think, and that's what I appreciate, even with podcasts like yours, is the fact that we're given these opportunities to now flesh out these conversations. Whereas prior to it was all 30-second sound bites, and we don't do anybody justice by telling a snippet of their story when we've got 500 years of oppression that we're dealing with.
Got it, got it. I love that. I love that. And it's the way that the stories get told is such a huge part, for lack of better words, and how things play out, the way people see them, you know what I mean? And everything, the way they get supported, the way that, like you said, it's not this controlling, of the narrative like it used to be, where it's just put out there like to make, and I just say it plainly, black people look terrible. And this is why this happened. We're gonna make him look like a criminal, Ahmaud Arbery. That's why he got killed versus black people, and not just black people but anybody who's for justice and equality, being able to be a part of those conversations and have more more involvement in how the stories are told.
Yeah.
So that's the thing I love about all the access to media, and like you were saying, these days and everything. So, and speaking of media, what's your let's talk about your background in and when what which let's tell us more about your experience and your background in journalism.
Wow. So, funny thing is, I started working in television news my sophomore year in college. I got an opportunity to come in and shadow some producers. And from there, I ended up getting a position as a video editor. Had to come in at 4 a.m., work from 4 a.m. to 9 a.m., and went to school from there, jugging it out. I did that for about 6 months. And the news director offered me a promotion to be a producer, but I had to come in at midnight. And so for over 2 years, I was working from 11:30 midnight to 9 in the morning, and then going to school. And I'm a kid that's I'm from the hood, and so we didn't have a whole lot of opportunities. And so when the opportunity opened up for me, I took it. And I'm really, grateful to God that that opportunity came along. And it was challenging. I think my grades suffered, and it was tough balancing everything. There was a lot that I was learning how to prioritize, how to schedule, how to do so much. But I mean, by the time I graduated, I had almost 3 years of experience as a video editor, producer. I mean, I was leading the entire morning show. I was the executive producer by the time I graduated, and so I came out with so much experience. And I think that's kind of what helped me even in the transition of running my own shop. Is I got such an early start on things, and I honestly didn't even realize what God was preparing me for. But I got such an early start on some things that by the time I turned 31, it's like I'm plotting a different course. And so I was in television news for close to 10 years. I covered everything, the Cosby trial, you know,
Wow.
a bunch of stuff. And so then I went to the Fulton County DA's office to lead up their PR department. I was the youngest person hired to ever do that. And this is the largest DA's office in the state of Georgia. And so, I go from there to learning a whole different side. And it was honestly there where I started to see the importance of really telling the other side of this story. And I remember hearing about a case involving four young teens, four Black teens. And it was one of those stories that really challenged me to really think about what I'm doing, and whether or not um, I'm really walking in this purpose that God has designed me to walk in. And the it was bananas because these were 14s that were arrested for the murder of a white guy that lives in Midtown Atlanta. And I remember sitting in the DA's office after they had the judge wrote a mistrial. And he was asking the prosecutor, well, all these kids were between the ages of 14 and 16. He was like, did they all have cell phones? She's like, yeah. He was like, well, where did their locations ping? She couldn't tell him because she hadn't done it. I was just like, hold on, what? Like, you got these kids on trial for murder, and we're not even doing the simple things of like checking to see where they were. Like, you can easily triangulate somebody's location if they've got a cell phone on them and get an exact location. She hadn't done it. So he said, go back and do it. And it was bananas because she took the police's word for everything, didn't fact check anything. And so what she did, she found out that the kids weren't in the area. But what's crazy is, and I forgot to say this earlier, when the judge ruled a mistrial, it was bananas because the victim's mother took the stand, and she said, my son came to me in my dream and said that y'all got the wrong people. The whole courtroom went crazy. That's what I was being told from the prosecutor. The whole courtroom went crazy. And I'm just like, whoa, 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 whoa. Like, what's going on here? What, you know what I'm saying? Like, what? And, turns out they started investigating. And this guy that died, they found out that he started seeing his ex-girlfriend who had a new boyfriend. And police hadn't even investigated that portion. It was just these four Black teens that they knew were near the area. But what's crazy is when they triangulated the location, the experts said they would have had to be flashed to run over there, shoot this guy, not rob him, and then head back to where they were. You know what I'm saying? And so it's like just seeing how much the system is truly stacked against us in terms of our dignity, our humanity, and just how important it is to have people on the other side of this equation that are saying, "Man, 1 plus 1 don't equal 2 in this circumstance. We need to do some more." And so, just being able to have a full conversation in this context, it just really showed me how important that it truly is.
Wow. Wow, wow, wow. Yeah, that's a huge, I mean, that's crazy just to put it plainly, the whole situation. But it's amazing how it all worked out. So do you feel like that was what kind of, got you started as far as, the impetus, if you will, or what kind of planted the seed as far as you being more interested in doing media and, becoming so involved in, civil rights and everything?
Yeah, and I think God had been stirring me into this place for a while, but I think hands down that was the most, because I wasn't the same after that. I couldn't go back to work and fake the funk. I couldn't, it was difficult for me walking in there and trying to uphold this oath that I swore to take. You know what I'm saying? Knowing that this system could care less about me or anybody that looked like me. And I think at that moment is when I started really, really crafting, what I wanted my business to look like, and how I wanted to fund it, and how I just wanted to get rolling. And I think that was probably the one case where I was like, I gotta go. I got media calling me from around the world trying to ask what happened in this case, and I can't talk. You know what I'm saying? Like I can't. I wasn't supposed to be talking about the case, and here I am as a black man sitting over here thinking about these boys that, if they were found guilty, they were going down the. I'm not saying these boys were completely innocent,
Mhm.
because they police obviously said they found out that they were getting into some different trouble that night, but to stack murder on there, you know what I'm saying? Like, that's a whole different beast, because it's like, even after 25 years, if they decide that they want to give these young men an opportunity to parole themselves, at that point they spent more time behind bars than they spent outside. And so now you've created the very element of the ills of society that you say you don't want on the streets, but you created it because you failed to do due diligence. And so it really helped me to see that, like, man, I've got to do more, and I understand that I got to do more, and it's on me to step up. And I think, having my daughter, I think it really pushed me to turn it up in a way that made a lot of people feel uncomfortable. But at the end of the day, you know, I'm I've got an obligation to ensure that I'm not only protecting my daughter, but I'm protecting the kids in that spirit that she's coming up with, and I'm not going to apologize for doing that.
Got it. Got it. Yeah. Yeah, I get it. So speaking of protecting your daughter and everything, I know that you recently ran for mayor of Sandy Springs,
Mhm.
right? And I want to know more about what that was like, right? But and all in the conversation about racism, and like you said, made me think about your daughter when the situation in Sandy Springs when you said you're protecting your daughter, um, because that was very challenging for you, right? As far as the whole, tell us about the experience and what the racial challenges you face in running for mayor in Sandy Springs.
Well, I think anytime you're doing something that's never been seen, and I don't want to say done, because the more and more I study our history, the more and more I'm seeing that we've been doing this for a long time. It's not that I'm the first, right? And I just want to be clear and really stating that I'm not the first. And even when folks are like, "Well, this is the first Black power," no, like, don't limit our history to America. We're not the first. Like, the same way all these other folks can connect to their international history, I'm connecting to mine. I'm not the first, right? I'm picking up what they were already doing prior to the transatlantic slave trade. And so um, it was one of the things that I don't even think I realized until literally in the last few weeks is how protected God had me. I mean, I was getting death threats and there was no fear in my bones, and it was interesting because I remembered one of the guys here. He was just like, man, at the barbershop, he was like, man, you getting death threats. And you like, pull up, dog. And it's like, it's not that I wanted them to pull up, but it's like, look, man, like, bruh, we in Georgia. Let's stop. I mean, Dr. King was packing. I mean, I know I know folks don't really want to have that conversation. They want to keep it nonviolent, but they had to tell
Right.
Dr. King, we need you to put your guns away. And so, I mean, I just think that folks have to understand that standing on what's right and what's just doesn't mean being soft. And you can stand in the fullness of who you are and your being. And I did everything that I was supposed to do in that. I was the one that went and got. I looked the guy up myself. I gave all his information to authorities. They decided they didn't deem it worthy enough to prosecute, right? And I think that's where we go back to this whole
Mm,
valuing of humanity, right? The fact that he could tell me he could kill me and my daughter was going to grow up without a father. And it's like, well, we don't see how you took that fearful. And it's like, you can't tell me how to take that. And so, but that aside, what it showed me is that there are a whole lot more people that are standing where I'm standing than are not. I think the problem with politics is we don't have enough people speaking the truth. And the more you get out there and speak the truth, the more that people are going to stand up and walk with you. And we just don't have a lot of people who are willing to be bold enough. They get into this narrative. They want to be in this Democrat, Republican, Trump, Biden debate instead of standing on truth. And standing on truth is a very uncomfortable place to be. But guess what? When people know that you're willing to stand on it, they will stand with you. And that's what we saw. We had the highest voter turnout per capita in Sandy Springs in the whole state of Georgia. People stood up. They had never seen an election like this in what was seen as a predominantly white suburb. I think the thing that people forget about is this is a city where it is documented. They said a Negro never owned property here. That's on paper. That's on paper. When they talk about why they pushed to found this city and the different layers that were working behind scenes, they'll let you know, hey, y'all can have Atlanta. We got Sandy Springs. Y'all ain't gonna own nothing up here, but we're here. And 50% of the city's minority. The largest group of that minority is Black. And when I ran, we didn't have any representation. No minority had representation on city council. Now we at least got one person up there, and it took 7 of us to run just to get that one. And so, the way I see it is, you know, I, I think so often in this space, people say, "Oh, you don't talk about politics. You don't talk about politics. You don't talk about politics." Where's that in the Bible, though? Like that's what you got. Where's that in the Bible? Because Daniel's stance was a very political stance. That's why he was thrown in the lion's den. Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. That was a political stance. They threw him in a fiery furnace. Moses, let my people go, was a political stance. And it's like if you were listen, you can stand politically and you can stand on God because he showed them time and time again how he was going to deliver them. And that's kind of what I was alluding to in the beginning when I was saying, like, actually going back and looking at the history of and I don't want to say Christianity because that's a very Western term, right? But when you look at the relationship that they had with God, and you start to see how strong it was. It was so strong that they were willing to stand on it, and how it saved them. I think people don't realize, what it meant for Moses to stand against Egypt. You know what I'm saying? What it meant for Daniel to take the stand. What it meant for David to walk up there with this little rock and, hey man, I'm about to knock you out, dog. You know what I'm saying? Like people don't understand what it meant, and so and then I mean, if you don't understand what that stuff means, you're never gonna walk in the fullness of who God intended for you to be because you don't know who you were intended to be because you don't understand it, and so that's what I started to learn and I think that's one of the things that really pushed me to to go deeper with my faith, and as I'm taking these different AfricanAncestry.com tests, and I'm seeing like, wow, my folks were in in Portugal prior to the transatlantic slave trade. A lot of people don't know that, that Inquisition that the Catholic Church had was the precursor for the slave trade. And if you go back and Google, you got popes that are apologizing about it, right? I didn't even understand that part of history. And so now that I'm starting to understand this part of history, I mean, I didn't, we weren't calling ourselves Christians prior to the transatlantic slave trade, but there was still a connected relationship with us and God. You know what I'm saying? And so I think that was being able to kind of have a better, because there's no way for me to have this conversation about social justice in context, and I don't even understand the history of how we got here, right? So that's what even pushed me to even go deeper with it. And I think the more that I started to see, oh man, there's more of an intersection between my faith, my heritage, my ancestry. The more I started to see all that, the more and more I started to walk a little differently, walk a little more proudly, walk a little more confidently, because I understood, man, like this whitewashed version of Jesus isn't it. There's a whole lot more. It's so much deeper than that. And I think the more and more I started to see that, I think the more confident I became. And so when we talk about this race for mayor, it's like I was able to walk a little more confidently and with assurance, because I started to fully understand, when they start talking about, in the Old Testament, that God of Israel, I understood what they were talking about, the God of Abraham, the God of Isaac, the God of Jacob. Like, studying out the history, it rang a little differently for me at that point.
Got it. Got it. Yeah. And, in the Bible, it talks about one of the scriptures, in Proverbs says that God hates the hands that shed innocent blood, right?
Mhm.
And when I think about racism, I think about that. You know what I mean? I think about, like we in 2020, when we watch what has been going on forever, but when we got more exposed to it than ever before, just all these, and even back to the young men that you were talking about earlier, maybe not the shedding of blood, but, we know that God stands against innocent people being mistreated, right? All people being mistreated, but especially, like it says, he hates the hands of those who shed innocent blood. And we know that that's a big part of racism. And there's also a scripture in the Bible where it talks about speaking up for those who can't speak for themselves, which I know
Mhm.
is a thing in law and all the above, when it comes to just some of the scriptures that they try to use in those kinds of fields and conversations and everything. But I feel like though that is just understanding that part of God's word and who he is and how he thinks should play into how we view standing up for racism, you know what I mean, and even politics. As Christians, I'm, like you said, I'm not with the division and getting into Trump versus this. I like what I like. I look at character, bottom line, you know what I mean.
Mhm.
um, but when it comes to understanding that there's that we can have a view and an involvement when it comes to policies, as Christians, without it being considered to be ungodly just because we vote, or,
Yeah.
like in your case, you're running, to be as a politician, or have run, and which I will come back to that. I wanted to ask you more about that in a minute. But especially when it comes to standing for, against racism,
Yeah.
sometimes as a I think the church wants to run away from those kinds of conversations. I think that sometimes as church leaders, they feel like they have they're limited on how much they can support or speak on or be involved in, racism against Black people, because they are trying to make sure that they don't lean too much in one direction, as far because their church is diverse,
Yeah.
to say it plainly. And I think they get afraid that if I speak too much on racism, then I'm leaving, white people out, or I'm leaving whatever other, ethnic group is, they're out. what were you going to say about to that?
I think what it comes down to is wrong is wrong. You know what I'm saying? Like, period. What I saw, especially when it came down to the R. Kelly case, is um, I had to tackle things that were systemically wrong within the patriarchy, and to say that it was uncomfortable is an understatement, right? The reality is men have abused power for a long time, and I think when I started to read the laws and understand that within these laws, as much as they say they want to protect women from rape and all these things and sex trafficking, there's still all these loopholes of room to wiggle. That if you're rich, if you're powerful, if you meet the necessary criteria, regardless of what you get slapped with, you can find a way around it. You know what I'm saying? And so I think for us, that's what was so important about the narrative is raising enough public awareness to where people actually took a look at it. And so um, when I think about the work that I've had to do within my inner me, just to fight the enemy, right? It's put me in a place to where honestly, um, I can't. It put me in a place to where I have compassion with pastors who can't take that stand, as in I feel sorry for you. Uh,
Mm,
but the reality is that that wasn't Jesus, and we got to be clear on that. When Jesus walked into the temple, he was flipping tables over. He was like, "Not in my Father's house." That's what he said. You know what I'm
exactly.
saying? So the question is, if you're allowing these things in his Father's house, is it truly his Father's house? And I just got to keep it 100, because if you say you love me and you vote against everything that would help me, right? Like, these are things that I've got to look at even within myself. Like, when I'm looking at how do I stand and create a world where I'm protecting my daughter, right? I got to put who I am aside for her benefit. And so if that's not the type of love that exists within the church, then I really question who this church is following. And I'm just going to keep it 100, because the
Mhm.
reality is Jesus stood against those things. And the reality is when Jesus really got hot in terms of standing on truth and standing on justice and standing on everything that he was supposed to stand on, the people that came against him were the same people from within those temples and synagogues. They were the ones that felt the most uncomfortable. And those were the same ones that he was telling, "Hey man, y'all are hypocrites." You know what I'm saying? If y'all truly knew Abraham, y'all would know me. Like, he was very critical of who they were, because they weren't standing on the principles that they said they were. These were men that, if you start to look at during that time, they're supposed to be Pharisees and men of the law and all these things, but they got side chicks. Like, that's the stuff that Jesus was calling out. And so it's like, you can't you can't be the person that you're supposed to be, and you can't overcome pornography. You know what I'm saying? Like, and I'm not saying that to knock anybody, but the reality is like, some of these leaders can't stand on what they're supposed to stand on, because they haven't conquered their own sins. And that's just the reality. Like, if you can't get your own sins out of your way, you obviously not trying to tackle a system of sins. That's just the honest. And I'm not saying we all don't have demons. I'm not saying we all don't go through our stuff. But I'm saying, when you point to the person that we're supposed to follow, when you point to
Mhm.
the person that came here that made an impact, he was taking on the church, he was taking on the government, he was taking on rich folks. He was like, "Hey, when they got on him about healing people on the Sabbath, am I not the God of the Sabbath too?" Like, what are we talking about? And so, like, when you think about in the purity of what he stood for justice in all forms. And so, if that's not what's coming out of the pulpit and out of the preaching, out of the teaching, there has to be a reevaluation of it, because, like, the more and more I'm studying this deity that came out of the East, the less and less I'm seeing how much that matches up with Western theology, and that in and of itself is a problem.
Well, that in and of itself is a conversation. But okay, and so, I guess would you say, to sum it up, do you feel like they're afraid to be real? Like it's just going to cost them too much to just come out and have a real conversation about it, about racism? Or are you suggesting, when you say if a person hasn't dealt with their own demons, it's harder for them to address it? Are you suggesting that maybe there are some leaders who still struggle with racism themselves?
Yeah,
And
I think without a doubt. I think you can see that, right? I think you can see it in how they talk, even how they approach the conversation. And I think, and if things get too hot, they throw one of us up there. We're gonna let y'all lead it, And but I think the reality is racism ain't got nothing to do with black folks. Racism has everything to do with white folks, and y'all dealing with it. Y'all created this system. We didn't create this system. Our ancestors didn't create this system. But I'm
Mhm.
also not going to allow this system to overtake my family. And I think that um, that's where I'm at, understanding that, I do have a God given right to say, I don't have to take this. And I think if there's anything that that I want people to take away from this is you don't have to take it. Like if folks don't want to vote different to include your family, if they don't want to love differently, because man, I don't want you to walk up to me, hug me in church, and tell me you love me. You know what I'm saying? But you see somebody that look like me outside, and you have no compassion whatsoever. You're calling him a thug. You're saying, well, George Floyd had fentanyl in his system. It's like, where's the compassion? Well, Ahmaud Arbery didn't live over there. He shouldn't have been in that house. And it's like, where's the compassion? And
Right.
so, and I think like even when we had the Ahmaud Arbery story, that's why it was so important for me to lay out the 50 different people who all walked up to that house to look inside to see what they were building, because it wasn't just Ahmaud. And so to use that as an excuse, and again, it's like I'm not here I'm not here to make anybody feel good. I'm not here to make y'all feel warm and fuzzy. I'm here to do the Lord's work, and anybody that truly understands who Jesus is and what He stands for knows that He would have been flipping over tables in some of our churches with some of the things that are happening. We got to stop making excuses for racism. We got to stop making excuses for sexism. We got to start being real about who we follow and about what the command is for us in this journey to be most like Him in our pursuit of heaven. And that's just the reality, because you can't you can't colonize an entire world and oppress different groups of people and think that this dude in the sky is just going to be looking with love and like an affection. It's no, that's not. Like, I mean, if he said when he comes back he's coming for war, it's like, man, you can see it. You can see the things that have built up. You can see the oppression, the injustice. When he sent
Mhm.
Moses into Egypt, he said, "What? I heard the cries of oppression from my people." It's like, y'all, what do y'all think he's up there looking at? Just what? Because we're in a mega church? Because we got a nice house? Like he's pleased with us? No, he's told us from the beginning he's looking at our heart. And it just reminds me of that story of the rich young ruler when he was telling Jesus, "Man, I did everything. I've been doing these things since I was a kid." And what did Jesus tell him? "Well, give away everything you have." Why? Because Jesus knew he wasn't doing everything. Because if this man was following Torah like he was supposed to, there would have been no poor and homeless people around him. But clearly, you saw in the scripture during that time there was poor and homeless. By law, they were commanded to help the immigrants, to help the poor, help the homeless, help the fatherless. You know what I'm saying? They were commanded to help these folks. And so I think it's an indictment on the church where we are right now in terms of how leadership is setting the course of things. And we just got to be real about what direction this is going to lead us in.
Got it, got it. I thank you for that. I thank you for sharing that. And I hope that that will help people. You know what I mean? To really, to think. I think it's a greater conversation. A lot more conversations to be had. For leaders. You know what I mean? For church leaders. Who are scared to address these things. And then, with us coming up on one of the roughest years that we go through in America, which is election year. What are
Yeah,
your thoughts about the 2024 election year
it's gonna be
coming up?
rough.
Mhm.
And I say it's gonna be rough because Biden won by a very slim margin because people who typically been on the sidelines came out to vote. Um, and when you look at who those people were, they were overwhelmingly us. And when you look at what the demands were, we were coming out of 2020. They wanted things systemically done with this institution of policing. They wanted there to be fixes. They were tired of seeing young black men being shot. They were tired of seeing the things that were happening to our young black women. And so when you actually look at what he's done based upon who voted, he ain't done nothing. I'm just gonna be real. He ain't done anything. And so when they ask why so many people are resigned from voting, it's because the politicians aren't listening and they're not working in the best interest of the people. And so um, I think it's going to be a tough go next year. I'm just being open and honest. I think there are going to be a lot of people who are going to get out, who are going to work, who are going to do what they've always done to make an impact. Um, but I think it's difficult to go back into communities and ask these folks to wait in long lines, to call out sick, to do whatever they need to do to get to the polls. They're not getting anything out of it, and so and that with us being on the heels of a well, I don't even want to say heels. I mean, we're in a recession. I think we'll start to see more of what that looks like next year, and so it's a lot of pressure that's being put on American families, and as we know, when by the time most middle class families catch the flu, 90% of the black community is dealing with full blown pneumonia. You know what I'm saying? That's how severe the issues are in our community. A lot of folks say I keep making this a black thing. No, I keep making this a what do the stats say? Stats say we are overwhelmingly on the bottom. 70% of us are still in poverty or under poverty. We don't have much economic wiggle room, and that's just being real. And so um, it's it's a lot, and so I think next year is going to be tough. And that's something we're gonna have to deal with when we get to it.
Got it, got it. So so if you were talking to me or just speaking to the church, the election year is coming up. Help me understand why, as a Christian, it makes sense for me to vote.
So I think that we're at a time period, right, where we can get out there and say, oh, God's got it. God's gonna do what God's gonna do. He got it. He got it. He got it. But I think when you actually look at the word, you'll see that He's always used people to make that impact. Even with Esther, her going up to the king, saying, "Hey, they're out here hurting my people." She could have easily been resigned to everything that was going outside the palace. Um, she was she was surrounded by the money, by the wealth. She was going to be taken care of. Well, Mordecai came to her and he said, "What?" He said, "God put you in this position. And if you don't do anything, he's going to raise somebody else up to do it." He's always put people in. And so when you talk about voting, we've got an opportunity as Christians to, in an unjust system, really fight to make it as just as possible. Is it always going to be just? No. But we're in an unjust world, and we already know that, which is why he's always raised up leaders. And the question we got to ask ourselves is, in these moments, who are we going to be? Are we going to truly walk out our faith? Are we going to truly put people at the forefront? Or are we going to say, no, I benefit from this system. I'm just going to let it keep operating as normal. I think again, it just comes back to where our hearts are. And I think the people of good conscience and good faith are going to keep doing what they do because they always have. And I think the people on the sidelines who are beneficiaries of this system are going to continue to do what they do. But I think it comes down to, for those of us um, who feel the spirit moving on our hearts, what are you going to do about it? And that's simply what it comes down to.
Got it. And I know a lot of I was thinking I know a lot of the argument. I mean, one of the most common arguments when it comes to Christians and the whole idea of voting is that neither one of these candidates are Christian, or they don't love God, or and they're looking for, why would I thought about it is, why would I cast a vote or vote for someone who is not godly? And what I often say is, politics is a business. It's not the church. You
Yeah.
know what I mean? It's not the
Well,
church. Mhm.
and how many of them work for bosses that ain't godly and ain't Christian, but they still show up and clock in and go to work and get their check? I mean, you collected money from somebody that's not godly, and so I think, and I'm not saying all bosses are, I'm just saying we all know who those people are. But I guess the point that I'm getting at is that argument is only used when they're faced with an obstacle that they don't want to deal with. And I think any other time, we got Christians who will take their kids to Disney World knowing, you know what I'm saying? It's like we do all this other stuff that's in the world, and we have that excuse for this one issue. We go watch horror movies, we go watch movies with inappropriate scenes in it. We pay money to go do this stuff. And then when it comes to politics, like, oh, I can't touch that. Can't touch that. That's too hot. Man, you just went to go see an action movie where they just shot 50 dudes. You know what I'm saying? You love watching Die Hard for Christmas. You know what I'm saying? It's like let's be real. And that's again, it just comes back to the humane thing. Like, are you really about humanity? Do you really love your brother? Or is that just a cop out? Like, and I guess that's kind of where I am. It's like, no, just stand on what you stand on. Just period.
Got it. Got it. Okay. I appreciate that. And what I want to ask you personally, what are you here for?
What am I here for on your
Mhm.
show? Or
No,
just
no, no. What are you here for in life as a person? What do you feel like you're here for as a human being?
man, I think what I'm starting to better understand more and more of is that I'm here to fight to make this a more just world. Is it gonna happen? No. No. I know that. I would be naive and dumb to think it is, but I think the reality is um, and I keep coming back to this. God has always raised people up, and when I look at everything that Dr. King stood for, I mean, even Malcolm X. When I look at everything that Malcolm X stood for, I'm looking at all these men, and you can see the influences um, of God in that work. And so I think for me, it's no, I'm going to step in. I'm going to step in this calling. I'm going to step in who I was meant to be. I'm going to fight for my community. I'm going to be a community protector. I'm going to fight to be a community provider, because that's what I'm called to do. And I'm not going to apologize for any of it. Nobody else apologizes for the work that they do in their community. I'm not going to apologize for mine. The running joke is, oh, that's Dante Luther King. Ha ha ha. Well, I mean, our kids need heroes too. And if
I've never personally.
and that's why I laugh at it. But our kids need heroes too, and I'm going to be one of those heroes. And so, when you ask me what I'm here for, I'm here to be a hero, and I'm going to do it, and I'm going to give our kids somebody to root for, and if it's just me they see doing it, they've got an example of how to do it and what it looks like.
Got it. Got it. Awesome. 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 So, do you think you'll ever run again for mayor, or is that not?
I don't know. I didn't. It honestly, I was sitting in the car in traffic, going to a vigil for Sequoia Turner, um, when when I heard God clear as day said, "Run." He was like, "All the changes that you're fighting for, you can make," and that's what I love. We've put so much pressure on this system up here. It's like we breathe and they're making changes. You know what I'm saying? And they're frustrated with us, because I think that we've brought attention to Sandy Springs that they've never had. And and we're making them answer questions they've never had to answer. But that's accountability. And as long as I'm paying property taxes in the city, as long as I'm paying these T-SPLOS, these E-SPLOS, and all these tax referendums, you darn right I'm gonna hold y'all accountable. You know why? Because these little black children matter. And I think it's important. And so you know, I spent so much. I spent the first 30 years of my life being uncomfortable. I'm not gonna spend any more time being uncomfortable. I'm putting that right back on the system that told me I was inferior, told me I wasn't good enough, told me I couldn't accomplish these things. Now y'all deal with y'all insecurities. I'm not doing it anymore.
Got it, got it. And that's one thing that I love about you from what I have seen, from what I do observe. You have this thing about you that you're like, make something happen, do something about it. You know what I mean? You really do have a real do something about it kind of mentality and attitude. I want to thank you. I think that you're amazing, as a
Thank
person. I don't know, we all don't know.
you.
To see, right? But I think that you're amazing. I think that you represent a lot of things. I do wonder at times, like, how does he, is he aware of, just who he is as a person? And what I mean by that is, when you say I came from the hood, but looking at the things that you were able to accomplish, just even on a basic level. And when I say basic, I mean you went to college, you put yourself, you didn't take other routes that you could have taken.
Mhm.
Staying out of trouble, I don't know, but just staying out of trouble, getting into the career, that you chose for yourself and everything, and then even having so much success in your, like you were saying, when you work for the channel and in your position as a in journalism, just all the different things that you were responsible for and managing that with such excellence, that you were up early, up late, making it happen, even while you were in college, moving forward and being a man of marriage. To me, that's a big deal. And a faithful man of marriage, you know what I mean? And to always have your wife and your daughter, out front and speaking so well of them, and the way that you're involved with your daughter, you show up. And I don't think you just do it for the Facebook likes, of course. You really are. You can tell your love for your daughter is so genuine. So you're a great father, and to get into, the way that you stand, like you said, so firmly on what you believe in when it comes to civil rights. And like I said, being a man who believes in making something happen. You didn't
Yeah.
just sit back and complain about, complain about, the city of, what am I trying to say? Sandy Springs. You didn't just sit back and complain about the disparities and all the things that are going on there. You said, I want to be a part of making something happen and making it better. And even the things that you're doing with your media group, your media company and everything, I just think that's amazing. And that's a lot. And to really bring it all home, you know what I mean? To the fact that you're a man who loves God. And even when you talk about how you give yourself and you're so dedicated to studying and understanding, what does it really mean to walk this thing out, as a man of God? You know what I mean? And not just being shallow and superficial and churchy and religious and, all those things that I don't believe in myself either, right? I've seen it. We see it, right? And it's not what God called us to. So anyway, what did
I
you?
appreciate it. I do. I appreciate it. I think I've had a lot of people in my life that have helped me. A lot of people. I didn't get here by accident. I think that's what inspires me to kind of keep this thing going in terms of showing up is there have been a lot of people who've showed up for me when I had nothing to offer. And I think that it's incumbent on us. Sandy Springs has a higher student homeless population than the city of Atlanta. A lot of people don't know that. When I ran for mayor, those were the kids I was thinking about. You know, when I get out here and I go to these turkey drive and coat drives, that was one of the things that we did. This year we were intentional about reaching out to corporations. Like, yeah, we want y'all at these other events, but but meet us in the hood too. You know what I'm saying? Like come out here and people think Sandy Springs, they see the money and they've been able to focus on the white upper class end of it, that they forget that it's a whole other sect of people here. And for me, I think it was just important to highlight that because I know what it was like for me when I felt unseen and unheard. You know, in that pit is nothing but pain. I grew up an angry child. I grew up wanting to fight. I grew up wanting people to feel the same pain and hurt that I was feeling.
Mm.
And to see people who consistently say, well, we're just going to give more money to the police department to deal with the crime, as though we don't know that there's a system that has allowed poverty to grow and grow overwhelmingly within our communities. I just can't stand by and act as though I just don't see it. I mean, there are a lot of people that look like you and I in Sandy Springs who are uncomfortable with the band-aid that I ripped off. And they're like, man, we just think you got to calm down. And I'm like, no, it's not. Because what I know is, right, is my mother had 4 kids. Out of her 4, I'm the only one doing what I'm doing. You can't tell me that my siblings didn't have dreams, because they did. And they're doing their best even in this moment to get there. But it shows you the systemic challenges that we all have to overcome. And the fact that they'll let 1, 2, maybe 3 of us get through those hoops, unless we're in entertainment or sports and athletics. They make that window is and that doorway is as narrow as they can. And it's incumbent on us to say that's we don't accept that. We don't accept what you're giving us. We're more valuable than that. And I had a chance to sit down and speak with a black man that is at a place I always wanted to be at as a child, in terms of you know having a successful business. I mean, he's competing with the likes of Amazon. You know what I'm saying? And to reach that plateau, and him saying, man, to get here and then see the state of my community. He said, I carry that everywhere. And I think that was God's way of showing me that, Dante, you can get the money, you can get all these things that you've been chasing, but when you get to that top, you're going to be carrying the weight of knowing that you could have done more and you didn't. And that's, for me, that's a lot of what I'm like, I don't want to be there. And for the time that, whatever time that God has given me on this earth, I want to make the most of it. I want to be as impactful, because at the end of the day, I think what people fail to realize is, when you go to the book of Revelations, it say that it says that God is going to open up 2 books. His laws, your deeds. You're going to stand before him. And of course, we'll have Jesus there, but it's going to be us looking at him. And if I got to
Mhm.
stand before him 10 toes down, I want to be able to stand with him, or stand before him, knowing that, look, man, I stood on everything that I believed to be right. I didn't do it because the church told me to sit down here, or my neighbors told me to sit down there. I stood on what I believe was right. And I just really believe that if more people took that approach, we could really see powerful changes in this world. But again, it takes being uncomfortable, and it takes a willingness to really want to walk this thing out, and really understanding what we're walking out, and not walking it out when it's comfortable. Baptism is just the beginning. You know what I'm saying? That's just the beginning. How deep you trying to get with this thing? Me, I'm trying to make sure that that my life is a reflection of his. And if it makes folks uncomfortable, you got to remember, he made folks uncomfortable.
And that is the perfect ending. That's a great way to end. But yeah, I appreciate it. I love that. I love all of what you were, what you're sharing, like I said, what you stand for, and everything. And I think the church needs to hear more from you, to be honest. I'm not
Hey,
just saying that. Like
don't think they ready.
I think the church needs to hear more from you for a lot of reasons, and just men of character, like I was saying, and men who aren't afraid to, like you said, stand on the truth. You know what I
Yeah,
mean? Response. So, anyway, I appreciate you. I appreciate your time.
appreciate
And I'm
you.
going to do something very, awesome. Would you mind saying a prayer for us and for all those who are listening?
Yes, yes. Father God, we just want to thank you for this time, this opportunity to really talk about your impact. Because at the end of the day, that's what it comes down to is your impact. And you set the course, you gave us an example, and we're just so grateful and thankful that even when we lack the strength, when we lack the courage, when we lack the the motivation that you remind us of your son that you sent here to impact this world in a positive way. We're just so grateful, so thankful for you. We pray that you can just set the hearts of our leaders on fire for you in a way that's going to make a drastic change and difference. It's one thing to go out here to baptize folks. It's another thing to change communities, to change lives, and be in the places where we've been told we can't be, because we know that's where your son was, and continues to be. And so we just want to pray for this podcast, pray for its growth and its impact, because we know that you are working here, and we know that something powerful is happening here. So we just want to pray for the hearts of believers, pray for our health, Lord, and pray for our families and our friends, and that we can be the lights necessary to make that impact. We just want to pray all these things in your son's name. Amen.
Amen. Thank you so much. I
No, thank
appreciate
you. I
it.
appreciate this.
And I'm sorry, I do want to say this. I'm gonna have to edit that. But I wanted you to share more about your company, like where can people find you at, your business and everything.
Yeah, y'all can find me at cartermedia.net. We've also got a YouTube page up, Carter Media Group, and yeah, we got a lot of our work out. We were really big on telling our own stories. Of course, we've got news articles out there from interviews that we've done with news organizations, but I think it's important to make sure that you hear from us. And so we're Carter Media Group on all social media platforms. CarterMedia.net is our website, and yeah, we're making it roll, making it shake.
All right. Thank you so much, Dante. I
Yeah,
appreciate you.
thank you, Maritha.